It felt a little bit silly to upload a video talking about the importance of channeling and how it's going to change the world, and yet I did not immediately upload a video talking about how to channel, or at least like my specific perception value on channeling, so my bad. Also, apologies for my appearance. It's really challenging to get daylight when you have a busy schedule. There's like only 3 hours where the video looks good, so forgive me for that. Also, I'm looking to get a microphone because I know that this audio is like not perfect, even though I do have a nice camera, which was a really great investment that I did and it was really important to me, but yeah, it's just not the best audio. So if you haven't watched my previous video, I would recommend doing that, but not a big deal if not. Channeling to me is essentially reading energy. And this is just my perception value. I think that there's a lot of different ways people can perceive psychic information, but I kind of think of it in two groups. So on one hand, there's channeling, which is like resonation, which is essentially you wholly and fundamentally understanding what an energetic resonance is and filtering it through your body. So it's kind of like, I feel like it gets kind of similar to when you like empath another person's pain, or like when you see things through their eyes, or when you just have this like really, really strong connection with them that you just like feel like you fundamentally know them. Like to me, that is kind of like channeling and resonation. And then on the other hand, you can have a different type of psychic ability, which is more so like receiving messages. So this is kind of when ancestors or spirit guides or any other kind of like conscious living entity, I think it also, like it doesn't necessarily need to be people who have passed. I think it could also be, you know, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of others, because they have like a life of their own, are kind of like directly like giving you a message. Like, I think that while both of them are like conscious and alive, to me, message receiving is more intentional, right? Like, it is kind of like coming to you versus like you going to it, which I feel is more like resonation and channeling. So it's interesting to kind of understand what is better, right? Like, and I think that people who are psychic do both of these things. Like, I don't think you need to be necessarily mutually exclusive. I think maybe depending on who you are, you're more likely to go into one of the two. For me personally, I kind of start with receiving messages and then I go like a little bit deeper into the like channeling and resonation. So if we're asking what is better, it's actually a really interesting question, because when you resonate with something, you're really kind of like feeling it through your own body, through your own perception value. Like you are it, basically, like you're living through it. And while we may kind of feel that that is the best thing, it really filters through your own perception value. So if you're someone who doesn't have a whole lot of life experiences, you haven't had a lot of parallel past lives, you may have limited knowledge and understanding, and channeling actually may not be the right, you know, fit for you. Because I personally feel that you need to have really expansive knowledge. And I think you can also kind of receive this in some way, shape, or form by being open enough. Like, I don't think it's a prerequisite that you have to have all of this information and knowledge, but I think that it's kind of like if you're trying to like sympathize or empathize with someone, it's easier to do it if you've gone through that particular experience yourself. You know what I mean? But it's not impossible. But, you know, the more experiences that you've had, the easier I feel it is to kind of like resonate with something. So there's that. And then on the other hand, receiving messages. Now, obviously, you know, the downside to this is that you can receive any message that you want, and it doesn't necessarily need to be truthful. I think that if you kind of like pull it into your heart chakra or your body, you can kind of discern whether or not it's truthful, but really anybody can say anything, genuinely. So while channeling is more so out of your own perception value, receiving messages is really out of that other entity's perception value, right? So it's kind of like, what is greater? Like, you may have limited knowledge and information, but it's your perception value, or you may have unlimited knowledge and information, but it's someone else's perception value. So it's kind of like a balancing act, which I think is why people kind of like go to one or the other. So I think that there's like there's a broad range of psychic information. And I think that there's also a really broad range of psychic ability, right? I think people think you're psychic or you're not. It's totally untrue. Everybody has a level of intuition. If we didn't have intuition, we just would not operate as, you know, a conscious unit. So it just has to happen. I think people are more sensitive to it or aware of it, but also at the same time, you know, there's people who have specialties. They're better at one thing versus the other. They use different filtration methods, right? Like some people are clairvoyant, some people are clairaudient. So it generally just really depends. And I feel like the amount of different types of psychics, different types of psychic information, and different ways to kind of like perceive this information is unlimited. And it kind of spans every single person that's here on Earth. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's also why this like conversation is kind of channeling, because I keep trying to want to express this information, you know, how to channel, what's the best way to channel. And it's so hard because I don't want people to get caught up in the nuances of it and feel that that approach isn't working for me. So like, I'm not psychic, or just to feel this way about anyone and everything. Like, just because someone has a particular method of doing something doesn't mean it's right for you. And this is kind of something in general that like bothers me, to be honest with you, because we all have a right to share our experiences and help educate and lead others. And I think it's really important. And I think these people are doing really, really important work. And I consider myself in some way, shape, or form kind of like wrapped up in this concept. But it can also have a little bit of a damaging effect if there's so many people coming out and saying, this is how I do something, but it's really limited to their own perception value, and it becomes kind of like unhelpful or detrimental to people who are following them because they just feel like they'll never be able to kind of like live up to this. And I think it's really upon the responsibility of content creators or leaders or facilitators to explain that, yes, this is like how I do it, but it's not going to necessarily like work for anyone and everyone. And I kind of get like a little bit bothered when people are so siloed into that zone and they feel like they're totally right, because it just sort of like alienates a lot of people from achieving success in like a slightly different way. It's almost like how you can come to a different conclusion with a different math equation, but it's still the right answer. And we all like know stories about those teachers who are just like, well, you didn't do it my way. But I think that we've kind of come a long way from that, you know, philosophy. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but just something to keep in mind, because it's a process, and it's a very individual process, because rather than kind of like achieving some sort of, oh my God, my battery's gonna die. Rather than achieving some sort of you know, thing that has more of a methodical approach or like methodical steps. This is like you accessing your deepest like intuition, the deepest like parts of yourself, most nuanced parts of yourself. And that's such an individual process. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's so interesting because there were so many experiences where I would like look online when I was like trying to understand what my psychic ability was. And they were like, do you see angel numbers? Do you see, you know, do you have premonitions? And I'm like, no, I don't have like any of this stuff. Like I had not one typical like psychic symptom. And I was like, okay, so I just like can't possibly be it. So it's not a one size fits all kind of like philosophy. So that's pretty much my disclaimer to channeling. So I will, you know, kind of go into my process and how I channel, which honestly is very challenging because I do feel like it comes like quite naturally to me. I guess figuring out how to ride a bike is a little bit more methodical. So maybe that's not like a great answer, but it's almost like, how do you like breathe? Like, how do you like see things? Like it just feels like it's just so innate that it's hard to kind of deduce down. But there are definitely some precursors, which I feel are really important, which are a little bit separate from the process, which I can kind of talk about. To me, one of the most important things about channeling is releasing yourself from any and all preconceived notions. And by that, I mean, you are going to start to feel, see, hear, whatever things which are almost 100% different than how they appear in a physical reality at face value. And it's gonna be weird. Like it is gonna be uncomfortable. It may trigger, you know, if you have kind of identity issues, which I certainly did, not that I was in an identity crisis, but I, you know, when you see the world in a certain way, when you have certain beliefs, like to challenge and trigger that, especially when you're doing it intentionally, is weird. It doesn't really feel right. So that's also kind of like a secondary topic. But anyway, you really have to let go of anything and everything that you thought. And I think that this is a really important concept, and it's also played out several times in our physical reality. Like, how many kind of breakthroughs have we had where, the person who came to that conclusion or that breakthrough wasn't trying, or they were intending on a different type of result, or like a different type of, they were trying to do something entirely different. Like, it happens all the time. And this is where really important and inspirational breakthroughs come through. So you have to kind of set that tone, because on a more like specific, to say this more specifically, if you go into it with a preconceived notion, you are going to ultimately be altering that result in some way, shape, or form, right? Like, you don't want to have, like, yeah, okay, you can go into a scientific experiment having like an idea what you think is going to happen, but like, at what point does that perception value interfere with the results, right? Like, yeah, everybody can be biased, but when information is this kind of like abstract and fragile, you really have to pretend like you know nothing. So you kind of need to get at that baseline going into channeling, like knowing and understanding that, maybe anything and everything that you perceive isn't real. Maybe anything and everything is the opposite of what it looks like. Maybe you're the villain. Maybe everything that you thought was a lie. Like, it's just like, you have to kind of be open to literally anything and everything, because I think that this is going to really project you into a lot deeper results. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I know it sounds a little bit, wonky and wild, but yeah. And on kind of like corresponding to that, I also feel like it's really important to pretend like you know nothing in terms of what the results look and feel like for you. Like, you could be channeling without you even realizing it. There are so many people that I have encountered that feel or think that they're not psychic, but they are. They're just not doing it in a way where they're sitting down reading clients and like looking into a crystal ball. So it's just, I don't know. It's such a, again, specific situation and experience for every single person. Okay, so you are at a point where you are totally open, you feel like you know nothing, but there's also another side to this openness coin, right? I genuinely feel that people block themselves from knowing and understanding the truth. Which is kind of funny, because I think that we a lot of times are searching for the truth. And I think that we really want to know the truth, but we want to know it on our own terms, and so long as it aligns to what our preconceived notion already is. And that is kind of stupid, and it's kind of like just going around in a hamster wheel if you think about it. And so you may ask, why would someone not want to know the truth? Well, why do a lot of people not want to access their intuition? Whatever that intuition may tell them could potentially ruin their life. Like, literally, like, it could have a catastrophic effect on their life. It could break up their relationship. It could force them into a different career. It could be the difference of what happens to them after they die, their religious affiliation. It could just, again, like, when my intuition opened up, it just like really messed with my identity. And if you're already at like a fragile state, like maybe you're struggling with mental illness, maybe you are just struggling with like literally anything and everything, or just trying to get your life on track, like, and you finally think you know the answers, something that comes in that so aggressively disrupts that is probably not something you're gonna wanna dive deep into and know what's at kind of like the bottom of that barrel. So I think that it's a lot more common than we think, because even if you're saying, well, you don't necessarily like need to go down that path, that's just like knowing the utmost truth and just letting it live inside your body and just having it exist there, and you not kind of like fine-tuning your life to that reality. It's like, that's just impossible. Like, once you know the truth, it has to somehow be integrated into your body, whether that is you, you know, kind of follow through with that physical reality, or you completely negate it and reject it, and it just slowly eats away at you and kind of like ruins your life, honestly. Because I think we all know that our truest, most authentic feelings ultimately have a way of being truthful, whether or not it's in the way that we originally anticipated it to be, right? Like it could just end up ruining someone else's life, right? Like it could be a projection of our own self if we don't kind of use it productively and proactively in the future. Okay, so we're starting our foundation with, you know, doing our best to eliminate fear. It's, you know, it's going to be a new thing. It's going to be scary. Like, I don't think it's realistic to like eliminate all fear, but like, I think it's kind of like that Harry Potter quote where it's like, you know, being courageous is not like eliminating fear. It's simply like knowing that there's something like more important. Oh my God, so, I'm butchering this, but like kind of like moving forward anyway and knowing that something is more important than fear, right? Like, and I think that is kind of the key, like knowing and understanding that aligning to your intuition can be really scary, but it is ultimately worth it, right? Like I kind of talk to a lot of people about this and they're like, isn't it scary to like go through this process, whatever? I'm just like, it is, but I find it scarier to live a life which I'm not living up to my potential, which I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just like living a lie, right? Like, and getting to the end of my life and reflecting on that, that scares me genuinely. And I think if you can kind of like use a similar type of logic, whatever that is for you, like I think that's going to be unique to everybody. Yeah, that's kind of where my head's at. So I don't think you're ever going to eliminate all fear, but yeah. Okay, so trying to eliminate fear or just kind of like move through fear as best as you can to align to your intuition. And then on the other hand, really not having any preconceived notions of what is going to happen. And I understand this is very difficult, right? Because there has to be some sort of a guideline, because, you know, I don't want to tell people just do it. Like, okay, yeah, that's like super unhelpful. But I think that I feel like when you start to do it, you're going to start to get it, right? Like, it's like when you start kind of like practicing and observing, that's when you'll understand it, because channeling and like reading psychic information is like a language that only you understand. So theoretically, you need to keep like digesting it and processing it and accessing it in order to understand it. Like if someone presents you a language that you don't understand, you're gonna be like, but if you go into each and every phrase and word and you're like, how do I feel I perceive this? Or like, how does this make me feel? You now have an idea of what that word or phrase is, and you can use that to your advantage. And because like everything is like a web, right? That word will come up again. That energetic resonance will sound similar to something else. So it's just kind of like decoding almost like hieroglyphics and like cave paintings and drawings, right? So yeah, I don't know. Okay, so that's kind of like the foundational elements. When you start to, my voice breaking? When you start to channel, I don't know, it's kind of challenging because I'm not a traditional meditator, but yeah, obviously like you want to try and be distraction free, not having a lot of loud noises. I think that you can do meditative activities, right? Like I feel like you can be driving, probably don't do that right away if you are trying to get into a deep meditation, but I personally do it. You can be washing dishes, you can be doing kind of like chores, which are, you know, maybe just like a little bit more basic so that you can kind of zone out. I feel like the concept of zoning out is like so important. I don't know if anybody's watched the Disney movie Soul, but they talk about like zoning out being you in a spiritual realm. And I totally agree with that. That's just kind of like accessing your subconscious, your higher self, and just any and all impressions around you. So that's really like the area that you kind of want to be in. And instead of zoning out in a way that you're only thinking about yourself or only feeling yourself, you just set an intention to be a little bit more open in general. Like, I think that's sort of like baseline for any and all psychic ability. You're just kind of like zoning out, and instead of like getting so focused in your zone out, I know you're not really thinking about it, but like you kind of are focused in your zone out just unintentionally. You just kind of are like what am I perceiving around me? Which is also a good kind of thing to note, because when I channel, I listen more within, and when I receive messages from anybody and everybody else, I just experience kind of like what's around me. So since we're specifically talking about channeling, I can kind of help explain exactly how it feels to me when I start to do this channeling process. Because for me, it's easier, depends. It's easier to start receiving messages because unless you're like totally distracted, I don't know. I just find it easier to like be in the moment and be like, oh yeah, like what is that? Rather than like setting an intention to kind of like feel within myself. I think that could just be me though, right? Maybe because I'm a little bit more extroverted than other people. I'm not super extroverted, or you know, whatever. It's just uniquely me, right? So I think that some people may be more avid channelers, and some people may be more avid kind of like receivers of information. It just depends. So the best way I can explain what happens to my body when I start channeling, like I set the intention to start channeling, is it all starts like right here in my heart chakra. And I do something which feels really scary. I like focus on the energy in my heart chakra, and I slowly, like once I kind of feel that energy, like once I'm kind of aware of it, even if you can't like feel it necessarily, because it could take a little bit of practice to feel it, as long as you're aware of it, I very slowly imagine it dropping down, almost like right before my heart. And what I feel like I'm doing, even though I don't have any evidence of this, is I feel like I'm slowing my heart rate. Maybe that's not what's happening, and maybe I'm just perceiving it that way, but that's like my best explanation of what I feel like is happening. So I'm very aware of the energy in my heart, and I slowly just like drop it down. And what's interesting about this process is it almost feels like when your stomach drops on a roller coaster. It feels very scary. And what I think could also be happening at this exact moment is that I am so aware of my ego, like in my heart space, and I just kind of slowly remove it. Like I slowly remove the substance that I feel makes me me, right? And I leave it open for this connection, right? Or this kind of like resonation, or even kind of like whatever external message is coming through. And it's kind of like a terrifying feeling, honestly, which is why I think I kind of like slowly kind of ramp up into it, because, you know, it can be kind of scary to be an open channel. You know, that's the other part of this conversation, is that when you're an open channel, you're open to any and all things. So that could be good, that could be bad. And it takes practice to kind of filter out the good and bad. And I also want to be clear that although I think that everybody can channel and everybody can benefit from channeling, it's not always the right time. If this is something you really don't want to do, don't do it. Like if you're just like, well, I want to do this in the future and I want to set intention and manifestation to like get to that point, that's amazing. Please do that. But like, don't just force yourself one day to do this just because you think that you need to do it. Like it should come out of a place of like authenticity and love, and not like force. And yeah, there's like a fine line between pushing yourself to do something uncomfortable, but yeah, you just don't want to force it, because it's just not going to give you very good results, you know? So when I kind of like bring my energy a little bit down, like basically like feeling like my heart energy is like going a little bit into my stomach, I basically set the intention for what I want to channel. And that could be anything. Like literally, I could channel how someone's feeling. I could channel how my plant is feeling. The point is, like, I open my heart chakra up so much that I can kind of take on the perception value of anything and everything. And I like resonate so much that I understand the truth. And it's almost kind of like trans channeling, like transmedium channeling. I'm not sure exactly, like trans. I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but like when someone kind of like allows someone to take over their body, which like is really not as scary as it sounds. And it's really like, I think it's what people understand possession to be, but like, yes, they have kind of like control of your body, but they don't at the same time. I don't know if anyone is interested in this. I'm also not an expert on it, but I can potentially speak to it. But it's like you remove yourself, your identity, your ego, and you just allow something or someone else in. Again, a very scary process. But what I kind of like to do, which is not the only way that you can do it, just to be clear, but if I'm saying I want to experience life as my plant over here, right? So I do this process where I drop this energy down and I just observe and I feel, and like slowly I get this like tingling sensation over my body that feels different. When you start to feel different from yourself, it's working. And maybe that's the hardest obstacle or the biggest hurdle to overcome. And it could also get really scary that you kind of like jolt back, right? Because that I think happens to a lot of people too. But it's working. When you feel different from yourself, that in some way, shape, or form is channeling. So like that's a good indication that you're doing it right. And you just have to be so open to whatever happens to you. It could be visuals, it could be sounds, it could be whatever, but as long as you are willing to do that work, to set that intention, to put yourself in a potentially uncomfortable or scary position, and again, just want to know, just want to feel, want to see, want to hear, I genuinely feel like you're going to be a channeler in no time. Like, I just don't know what would hold you back. I don't feel like it's ability that separates channelers from not channelers. I think that it's the blocks that people have that prevent them from doing it, honestly. And yeah, I do feel like some people are here more so to be channelers than other people. So I'm not saying that everyone is going to do it to such a precise extent, or that everyone, like there's going to be so many ranges of ability and accuracy and ease, but everybody has the ability, without a doubt, because we're all part of the same consciousness, which means that I am a part of anything and everything that's conscious and living, every single entity. And I think that's why channeling exists, because if you're coming from a place that like, oh, that's impossible, like how could you see out of someone else's perception value? Because you are everything. You are literally everything and anything. And, we have come from like one source fractal out, and we can also go back up. And that's kind of like what we do when we die anyway. Anyway, that's just my perception value, just what I think. But yeah, I'm trying. So that is pretty much the summation of it. And, obviously there's like other steps to this. Like, I do just want to flag that. I do just want to share that impressions sometimes don't make sense. If I have a tingling sensation over my body, like I was explaining when I was channeling the plant, if you kind of immediately shut that down as being irrelevant, not channeling, or something that like you're not intended to understand, you're never going to understand it. Like, you are kind of like dismissing the point as a whole, that could actually be the most important clue to your intention and your channeling, and you're just like immediately dismissing it. And what you just need to do is, again, kind of like do that channeling process. Because like, by the way, when I receive messages, it takes like some digging. Like, it's not just writing on a wall. Like, I have to go back to that energetic resonance with more of an intention to understand, and the ability and kind of like intention to dive like a little bit deeper. So then I would go back into this kind of like channeling trance and be like, okay, what is this? What does this mean? Is this how plants feel? Is this how this plant feels? Are plants more sensitive to things than other people? And then you don't have to always remove any and all knowledge that you have, because like you still need to like bring it back to a point in place and understand. Like, you still need to kind of like merge your kind of ideas of the world. It's just more so that like you can't be forward with that. Like, that can't be your first foot forward, but like it can still be questions that you ask yourself. So I know and understand that leaves get food from the sun and photosynthesis. So is this trying to explain to me that this is how this process works, and that it's like more sensitive to its surroundings than humans? And like, if I kind of like go back into my channeling trance and I'm like, oh, that feels good, that's right, then it's right. And all of this decoding is, again, such an individual process. When I perceive something that feels right to me, I feel a sensation in my chest. And when it feels wrong to me, I feel a sensation in my stomach or my gut. And some people would be like, that's insane. I actually specifically saw a TikTok video that was like, if you feel something in your chest, it's not your intuition. And if you feel it in your gut, it is intuition. And I was like, not for me. Like, it's like the exact opposite for me. So like, again, this is how kind of this information can be a little bit misleading. There's actually like an interesting kind of experiment that you can do where you're just like in this meditative state and you ask yourself a series of true and false questions that you know the answer to understand what a yes feels like in parts of your body and also understand what a no feels like in parts of your body. So an internal pendulum, which is what it's called, can be like a really, really simple thing that you can do to get a yes or no answer without doing all of this kind of like analyzing and decoding and interpreting. I will say, however, that having your body or having the universe answer in a yes or no way can be a little bit misleading because the concept of right and wrong and duality just really negates a lot of stuff. So like, there's just so much other information and, you know, nuance to it that like it can be kind of hard. I know people who like are really dead set on it, but I think that when you become more expansive and your energy becomes more expansive, yes, no, right and wrong, it becomes a lot less relevant and it also has a lot less value, in my opinion, because say, for example, someone wants to know, you know, if you ask a black and white question and you get a black and white answer, there's just so much other stuff, right? Like, how could you ever possibly like get through the entire realm? Anywho, I'm running out of something. I don't know if it's space or whatnot, but I gotta go. I feel like that was actually pretty in-depth. I don't think there's anything necessarily that I wanted to say that I didn't. It's a process. Yes, you know, practicing this indefinitely could hypothetically not get you to the results that you want if you refuse to kind of like acknowledge a block. Also, feel free to set an intention that you want any blocks that you have to be removed in terms of your, you know, your channeling journey. You could absolutely do that. If like, you're like, I'm afraid I have a block, it's like not working, ask for signs, ask for help resolving these blocks, and I think that you will get what you want. Also, another Harry Potter quote, which is like very true. You'll get help if you ask for it. That's like the biggest thing in the universe. So do not downplay intention setting. Do not downplay asking for help. You'll receive it if you need it. It's just that people sometimes don't want it or they just don't ask for it. But know that it's a thing for sure. Good luck with your channeling journey. Let me know if you have any other advice or insight or experiences that you think are helpful or important. Because I feel like this is like a community kind of experience and situation. Like it feels impossible to kind of do it on your own. I feel like there's always a need for, you know, others who are sharing their experiences, like a leader or a facilitator, particularly people who are intuitive and can kind of understand and go a little bit deeper into your particular perception value and experiences. Bye.